Dr. Marcus Chen had been working on theoretical quantum entanglement matrices when the Vorthak found Earth. The reptilian empire had swept across 17 star systems in the past century, collecting the brightest minds from each conquered world to fuel their war machine. To them, humans were just another primitive species whose intellect could be harvested. They were wrong. The Vorthak detention facility orbited a dying red giant, its metal corridors humming with the work of 1,000 enslaved scientists from across the galaxy. Each species had their specialty. The crystalline Zeltharians excelled at energy manipulation, the gaseous Numids understood atmospheric engineering, and the insectoid Krix possessed unparalleled mathematical precision. But humans? The Vorthak had heard whispers of their adaptability, their tendency to find solutions where none should exist. Marcus was assigned to Laboratory Complex 7, tasked with developing more efficient hyperdrive technology for the Vorthak fleet. His overseer, Commander Threx, was a scarred veteran whose yellow eyes held nothing but contempt for the soft-skinned mammals under his command. "You will work 16 hours daily," Threx had growled during Marcus's first day. "Failure to meet. Quotas results in reduced nutrition. Sabotage results in spacing. Understood, human?" Marcus had nodded meekly, his brown eyes downcast. "Understood, sir." But behind those seemingly defeated eyes, a brilliant mind was already calculating possibilities. For 3 months, Marcus appeared to comply. He submitted regular reports on hyperdrive efficiency improvements, each showing modest progress that satisfied his overseers without raising suspicions. Meanwhile, he observed everything: the station's layout, security protocols, guard rotations, and most importantly, the other prisoners. The Vorthak had made a critical error in their arrogance. They assumed that keeping different species segregated would prevent collaboration. They failed to understand humanity's greatest strength, the ability to unite others through shared purpose. Marcus began with Dr. Zeph 4471, a Zeltharian whose crystalline body pulsed with bioluminescent equations. During their brief encounters, in the communal eating area, Marcus would trace mathematical proofs on the table with his finger, equations that Zeph recognized as revolutionary approaches to energy manipulation. Next came Numid Research Collective designation Whoosh of Evening Wind, whose gaseous form contained the memories of atmospheric engineers from 7 worlds. Marcus demonstrated breathing techniques that allowed him to communicate in their frequency-based language, sharing concepts that bridged the gap between solid-state physics and gas dynamics. The insectoid Krix were the most challenging, their hive-mind mentality making individual contact nearly impossible. But Marcus realized he didn't need to reach individuals, he needed to reach their mathematics. He began leaving complex calculations in their workspace, theorems that built upon their existing knowledge but pushed into territories they'd never explored. Within 6 months, Marcus had established a covert network spanning the entire facility. Each species contributed their unique perspective to a project that none of the Vorthak suspected, because they were too busy celebrating the increased productivity their slaves were showing. The key breakthrough came when Marcus realized that the Vorthak had inadvertently provided him with everything he needed. The station's position near the red giant wasn't just for energy, it was for concealment. The star's magnetic field interfered with long-range communications, keeping their operation hidden. But that same field could be manipulated. Working through his network, Marcus began construction of what he privately called the Stellar Cage. The Zeltharians grew crystalline matrices throughout the station's hull, disguised as routine maintenance. The Numids gradually altered the atmospheric composition in specific sections, their changes so subtle that environmental sensors registered them as normal fluctuations. The Krix performed calculations that guided every modification with mathematical precision. And Marcus? He designed the symphony that would conduct it all. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. The modified crystals would create quantum entanglement fields throughout the station, while the altered atmospheres would serve as a conductive medium. When activated, the entire facility would become a massive stellar manipulation device, capable of controlling the red giant's magnetic field. Commander Threx grew suspicious when the quarterly productivity reports showed improvements across all departments. He arrived at Marcus's laboratory during the night shift, finding the human hunched over his workstation. "What are you really working on, mammal?" Threx demanded, his clawed hand resting on his plasma pistol. Marcus looked up, his brown eyes now blazing with intelligence that had been carefully hidden for months. "I'm working on freedom, Commander. Would you like to see?" Before Threx could react, Marcus activated the quantum cascade he'd built into his workstation. Throughout the facility, crystalline matrices began to resonate. The altered atmosphere started conducting energy in patterns that defied conventional physics. The Crick's calculations proved flawless as systems that had never been designed to work together suddenly harmonized. The red giant's magnetic field began to shift, guided by the station's quantum entanglement network. What had once been chaotic solar radiation became ordered, directed, purposeful. The star itself became a prison, its magnetic field creating an inescapable cage around the facility. Emergency alarms blared as Vorthak officers realized their predicament. Their hyperdrives couldn't function within the magnetic distortion. Their communications were completely blocked. Even their weapon systems were disrupted by the quantum interference. Marcus stood as his fellow prisoners emerged from their laboratories, no longer slaves, but liberators. The Zeltharian crystals pulsed with victory songs. The Numid collective swirled in patterns of jubilation. The Crick's mandibles clicked in harmonic celebration. "The field will hold for approximately 50 years, Marcus announced to the assembled Vorthak officers, his voice carrying throughout the station's communication system. "Long enough for your empire to forget this facility exists. Long enough for your prisoners to become your teachers, if you choose to learn." Commander Threx stared at the readings on his scanner, his reptilian face showing an emotion his species rarely experienced. Fear. "How did you, a primitive species from an unremarkable world, how did you coordinate this without our knowledge?" Marcus smiled, and in that expression was reflected the entire human experience. The centuries of building bridges between cultures, of finding common ground across impossible divides, of turning diversity into strength. "You enslaved our bodies, Commander, but you never understood our minds. Humans don't just adapt, we help others adapt too. We don't just survive, we help others thrive. You tried to use our intelligence for destruction, but we chose to use it for liberation instead." The red giant pulsed once, as if acknowledging its new purpose. Around its dying light, a prison of stars held fast, and within that prison, the first steps toward a very different kind of empire were being taken, one built not on conquest but on cooperation. After all, that's what humans do best.